Practical experiences in searching for native animals. Case Estonian native sheep by Annika Michelson. So globally we have a lot of diversity among our native animals, domestic animals that are not in any way monitored, or any inventory are not necessarily made up on them. People very often even do not see this diversity. There may be even very high educated professional people that do not necessarily see this diversity, even if they, based on their education and professional workplace, for example, within the professional area, should actually be able to see this diversity. So it's very easy to say that there is nothing left. Then you don't have to look for anything. Whereas if you say that there may be something left, then that would mean that you would have to start to work on it. And the work of searching for native animals, it's not an easy work. It's not done very quickly, and it's a process. And you may also have to do some kind of breeding, or so to say back breeding, in order to get all the characteristics of that animal that it used to have. So it may be have mixed with some other breeds or more modern breeds and have some typical characteristic of features from those, but it is possible to go backwards, so to say, also in the breeding, purely by selection. So that's why this very colorful picture with many structures and colors and marks here. We have to learn to see the diversity and learn to recognize it when we have it. The starting point is usually that you know native breeds in other countries, and they are like global things we are looking for. They are not necessarily only some marks, colors, or structure from one smaller area, but they are actually global things. So if you learn to know and to notice some few native breeds, this information would be possible to transfer to any locality of the world, nearly. This presentation is done in memoriam for Ragnar Edberg. He was a Swedish pioneer in looking for native breeds and did then a great job together with Gute for sheep. Ragnar Edberg did also support the searching for the Estonian native sheep, and what we know, we learned from him. Without Ragnar Edberg, our work would not have been possible. In that way, it is totally relevant also to say that we managed to save the Estonian native sheep thanks to Ragnar Edberg. Thank you so much, Ragnar, for your hard work that you made. In Sweden, the preservation of small native populations began already in 1970s, as in Finland a little bit later in 1980s. At that time, the entire work was done based on interviews. So interviews with the domestic farm animal owners. Only in the 21st century, DNA research was possible. it became so cheap that it would be possible, and also technologically it was developed that far that it could be carried out. It's important to also study the morphological features, characteristics, and traditional culture of native breeds. So it's not enough only to base your work on DNA research. It has to be at the same time also been studied the morphological features, so the looks of the animals and also other characteristics of the animals. This is among the first photos that I saw of Estonian native sheep, which told me that yes, this sheep is actually still alive. It was very easy because this sheep looks exactly as the native sheep looks in Finland or in Sweden. So this is a North European short-tailed sheep. So it had all the features of those sheep. So with only that very little information, it was possible for me to say, yes, native sheep is still alive here in Estonia. Still, I'm very much I have been very much thinking about why we got so little support from the established professional sector of animal husbandry in Estonia, and actually the whole process of investigating the Estonian native sheep, we got very strong negative feedback from the established agricultural sector. And most likely the only reason was that they did lack the knowledge about native sheep. They didn't know North European short-tailed sheep. They didn't know the Finnish sheep, even if they should have known it, because it is so close by. During Soviet Union, the country was of course very isolated. So, but even though that during Soviet Union there was also imported to some very small extent Finnish sheep to some few places in Estonia, and for me it's possible by just looking at them telling that is this an Estonian native sheep or a Finnish sheep. So there are differences. Native sheep tend to have information about them only in local language, and even that may be very little information. So, for example, large introductional materials in English on native breeds in different countries are not that much available. Or at least used not to be 10 to 20 years ago. Now with social media, it's getting more easy to have access to the information. So this is one of the pictures, and then there was one more. This is actually a still photo taken from a video, and you can see that the pixels are not so good. This is taken in the beginning of 2000. So 2004 perhaps, with the video camera, but most important for me was the eave here to the left. You can see this tail, this triangular form of the tail. So legs with no wheels and triangular tail. That's really telling us that this is North European short-tailed sheep that here is. If we look a little bit more at the tails, then we can see this one here. It's a little bit longer and it's not triangularly formed. So it means that there is in the head also something else. The intensive work with Estonian native sheep, it took some 5 to 6 years, where we made interviews and farm visits. And very typically, I in the morning just jumped in the car and looked at the map and tried to see that in that area which were the more isolated locations of the county. And I just drove to those villages, kept my eyes open. Could I see sheep fences? Many times there was no fences at all also, but they could be sheep because they were free ranging. And if I saw some people, I just stopped by the road and asked them that, do you know, is there any sheep in this village? And if there were any sheep owners, I just drove up to the farms and asked them that, could I see your sheep, and that I was looking for this short-tailed sheep. They did not know in Estonia the word Estonian native sheep. At that time, even this word, there was a word for native sheep, but it had become in 50 years, 70 years less familiar, and or it was not used. It was there, but it was not used for those sheep. So actually, it was easier to catch the sheep by saying, oh, do you have some sheep that are thinking by themselves? So, for example, leading the herd flock to different places and out of the grassland, most often perhaps into the forest, or doing something. And then people like recognize, yes, I have this kind of sheep in my flock as well. And when I got to look on it, then we could recognize that, yes, this looks like a North European short-tailed sheep. So besides these interviews and farm visits, which took largest part of the time, then we were looking for old photos, postcards, old movies, old literature, old documents, poems, old maps, works of art. Yeah, and sometimes very surprising places is like on post stamps or on money. This is on paper money. And in one church also we found some proof of native sheep in Estonia. So many years of work, which was done 100% voluntarily. During those years, we got used to talk with elderly people all above 60 years old, many of them 80 years old, some of them 90 years old. With these people, they had old memories, and they remembered their mothers and fathers' sheep as well. So this was really a journey, and it was not only talk about sheep and how to keep sheep, but usually the people shared a lot of information, not only about native sheep, but also about native other breeds, and as well about native plants. The methodology is pretty simple. We tried also to search via radio, television, and newspaper announcement, but actually that do not function or did not function at all in Estonia. So people did really not contact and tell after they have been listening to something in the television or reading newspaper that they had these sheep. So the only way was that actually some younger people were reacting on this radio, television, and newspaper. They were calling in and told that my grandmother actually has something that maybe is what you're looking for. So they were sending messages or calling or sending email letters, and based upon that we started the search. First we had to jump in the car and we went to the first village or the first person. And if it was with plants, then usually they had got the seeds from somebody else, who got it from somebody else, who got it from somebody else. And we went until we come to the last person who said that, yes, this was my in my grandmother's farm during her childhood, and then we could stop. And then the journey typically would have been going many kilometers. Yeah. So what you do need is you need time. You need not to give up. So you need a kind of sisu, which we call in Finland. You cannot give up, and then you need the money for the gasoline because you had to drive a lot. You had to go there personally to visit these places. And with sheep, then it was usually in the same way that we went to the first place and maybe we found some animals there, but maybe we found some traits of it that it had been used there, but they was not so, how to say, good looking. We needed them at least to have most of the characteristics in one animal. But usually then we could ask them that, okay, where did you get your ram? Or have you been buying some sheep? Usually only rams were exchanged. No, very seldom people bought eaves. And we got an address to the next farm, and we went there. And from there we could again get more information about more farms. So it went like in a change. So finding one place could lead to that we found actually 3 places. Ideally, this work would be good to do, of course, with finances. It could be done with project finances, looking for native sheep and mapping them. But to do that, you really need to have the authorities or any universities, at least with some professors or some organization behind you that believe in the work that you are doing. So why this work was carried out totally on voluntary basis then in Estonia was that there was not the possibility neither for financial support, but very strangely also not any moral support, not from authorities and not from the established agricultural sector as well. Questions, yes, you have to ask the right questions and you have to do the documentation. This is actually the most difficult part, is the documentation, and it's the most important part. So where and who did you get it from? Contact information of those persons also, and even the name of the villages is helpful. How long have you been having these animals? Where did you get the males? Why do you keep the animals? Why do you grow the plant? If it's a plant, does it taste good? If it's the meat, how does the meat taste? How does the milk taste? What are you using it for? How do you use it? How was it done before? How was your, for example, mother or father doing this? And have you shared or sold something to somebody? To whom? Where do they live? The contact information. And you have to take photos. You also ask, do they have some old photos in their own personal photo album that you could perhaps snap a copy of? And then you have to write it down immediately. We did not do this diary of mapping the animals. Which we should have done. I also was doing a lot of driving to different places in Estonia, and I also did not drive down the dates. When did I go where? It's easy to not understand the important about the documentation. So if you want to start to make inventories in your own country about native breeds, then please keep a diary, write down what date did you go where and with whom did you meet. And talk. This will be very valuable afterwards. To also to show, if you are doing it on voluntary basis, also to show the people what kind of work you actually did on voluntary basis. And And what was driving us forward was the will. We wanted to preserve the cultural heritage related to the Estonian native sheep. We saw the importance of this animal, which great role it had played in our cultural history, and keeping all the Estonians warm and letting them have meat to eat. This was and skins and also horns for raw material. This animal was a very important animal during thousands of years here in Estonia, and we wanted to have this animal and give it forward to our children and grandchildren. So that was the main driving factor in this work that we did. So the attitudes, the owners may underestimate or belittle the animals or plants. Yes, they are small, they grow slowly, they are not useful. It's an old habit to keep them. We heard many times, I should have killed these a long time ago, or I will kill them soon. This was very much the attitudes among those who were keeping these native small-sized sheep. So you should not, as a monitoring of native sheep, you should not praise them too much, because then you could also lift up their expectation to that they will become rich or famous or something, which not is the case. It's just better to state that this is obviously an old plant or an old native breed, and it's better to preserve it. If the owner himself does not want to keep these, then ask for seeds of plants or roots, shots, or then to start you can buy them or you can exchange them if it's an animal. So in some cases the owners did not want to keep these small with little meat, these sheep. They asked us if we could bring them bigger meat animals, and what we did, we just exchanged them. We brought for them bigger sheep animals, bigger meat sheep animals, and we got these smaller native sheep in order to get them into the gene pool. Of course, in that case, you need a farm where you can take the animals to, and you need also the money to, of course, to buy these exchange animals, and then you need gasoline to drive these animals away from that farm to the new farm where they will be preserved. And it's quite an effort there. We tried to share the information with others interested, and we did share. And we shared also information with researchers when they were not that interested in Estonia. After some longer work, then we found some interested as well. But that could, of course, be an issue. I think that here try to focus then on perhaps younger people. Younger people may not be so, maybe more open-minded. So if you find some young researchers, then that would be really nice. During this very hard work in looking for these living native sheep, it was extremely important for us to get information, photos. Here, for example, an old photo postcard about these sheep. Pay a notice here also that white are only white and black are only black. So they were perfectly managed by women to make as little workload as possible. They were mating white separately and black separately. In old films, found some old newspapers referring to them, and this one was very old. It was from 1825, and which gave really a lot of boost for us looking for native sheep, because it said here that it's it may be how it is with this sheep, but our own native sheep is the God's gift for the people, because they get everything that they need from this sheep, and get a huge benefit from this native sheep. So these native sheep are usually multiple benefiting animals. So it was not only, you could get from it the wool, the skin, the meat, the milk, and the horn, and the bones. So you got really a wide range of raw materials that you could process then into different utensils and products. We found also in some old books information. For example, here is drawn a picture on, and here in the middle you have, it is written here, Estonian local aborigine sheep. So this is like the native sheep. And then it is shown here how other sheep breeds from other countries came into this, and it goes out here like two sheep breeds only, which is the Estonian darkhead and the Estonian whitehead sheep, and it's telling this figure like the native sheep should have died out somewhere here in 1910. The resources were limited also in the 1930s and 1940s and 1950s and 60s. People, we didn't have the researchers going out looking at farms actively to find native sheep. And it was even very difficult to enter the islands in Estonia. You had to have a permission during Soviet Union time to go to the islands. It was called of borderland. Because it would have been easy if you had a boat to escape from there to outside the Soviet Union. So of course on the islands we found these native sheep, but we did also found in many other places native sheep on the mainland of Estonia. So it was not just on the islands, even if the populations as a total most likely were bigger on the islands, but also in southern Estonia and in Pärnumaa we found populations that were pretty large. In poetry we found poetry that were describing native sheep. In art we found like this one. This is an 1946 painted from a manor estate, sheep stable, and you can see how many here are also these dark colored sheep, which are native sheep, and most likely also the white colors among them are native sheep. Found from 1930s, this is from 1933, a bill, a money bill from Estonia, and here you can see also a native sheep ram and some native eve as well. Yeah, this is an kind of a bill also, or yeah, you could get this for exchanging wool and also meat if you were giving this to some kind of collection point during the war in Estonia. And here is also a photo of a black Eve here. Then in a church we found a very old sculpture with a short-tailed sheep as well, made out of wood, and this is pretty big. The Inventory Working Group of Estonian Native Sheep at Sae Farm, 7th January 2005, From the left we have Katrin Kabun, who worked with wool, Gilleke Koppamees, who was one of the initiators to start up the first organization also for the native sheep. And Kaja Lepik from Estonian Fund for Nature was a veterinary, Urmas Saarma, genetic researcher from Tartu University, then farmers Imbi Jäätma, Taavi Jäätma, Herki Idvand and Anneli Ärmpalu Idvand, also farmers and keepers of native sheep. Then Eda Saarberg also started up as a sheep farmer, and then Annika Michelson from Häme. To the group was also then Heikki Luhamaa, also Anneli Ärmpalu Idvand is not on this photo, and Urmas Vahur did also participate in the searching group of native sheep in Estonia, but they are not on the photos here. After that the sheep were found, then UNESCO financed a project, preservation of native sheep as a cultural heritage value in Estonia, and in the frame of that project were collected blood samples and carried out then afterwards the DNA analysis of the blood samples. Here at a farm in Tõstamaa region, collecting then blood samples. To the right you can see Urmas Saarma with blood samples. At the same time there was also done morphological measurements of the sheep. And here then measurements of sheep at Ruhnu Island. And we used this kind of sign where was written the name of the sheep and the number of the sheep. We took a front up picture, a picture from the back, a picture from the side. Side picture. We did also find some sheep with no outer ear, and due to the owners they had normal hearing. And here a photo of such a ram. And here a photo of some, also to the right, one sheep with no ears, and to the left one with very short ones, and in the same flock was also one with very long ears. And here one ram with no ear. Many times we also saw other native animals when we visited the farms. Here is, for example, a flock of cocks, and we did not have the possibility to make any research on these afterwards, but these are most likely also native. On one farm we found also some geese, and also these are most likely native. From the UNESCO final seminar we have only one not that good or sharp quality photograph, but here you can see the core group, Kaja Lepik, Annika Michelson, Heikki Luhamaa, Anneli Ärmpalu Idvand, Urmas Saarma, Katrin Kabun, Gilleke Koppamees, and behind the camera is Imbi Jäätma. More animals were studied from some population than from others. For example, Kihnu looks here at the picture very big, but that's because there were more investigated the sheep at Kihnu. It did not mean that there were more native sheep necessarily in on that island than in the other places, but it was just due to which were studied. So the picture does not show how many native sheep of different groups were, but how many were studied from different places in the UNESCO project. Usually the oldest eaves in the flock were examined, not related to each other, those we were looking for, and not all the animals. And we had also on restricted amount on how many blood samples analysis we could do. So that was also a reason to that we could not study the whole population that what was at that point available. Not all owners caught all the animals, so the ones that were caught we could get examined. So some of these old people did not manage to catch these animals, so we could not take the blood samples. So blood samples were taken around 300 animals, and 2/3 of these were then native animals according to the DNA analysis. So the NGO for Estonian native sheep was established in 2001 and was then stopped to exist in 2009. And it was split, the organization, due to different opinions about what kind of animals are native Estonian sheep, and that's where the association stopped. So in 2007 already, NGO Kihnu Native Sheep Breeders Association was established, and this was also one of the larger native sheep populations that were analyzed in the DNA research project. And that, of course, gave them the base for the preservation work as they were most analyzed in that region. So in 2010, NGO Madjas for Native Breeds and Plants was established, and in 2016, Kihnu Native Sheep, this one population that was mostly investigated, was registered as a breed. And in 2019, Kihnu Native Sheep was registered as an endangered breed. And in 2022, the Estonian native sheep then was registered as a breed, and in this group are all native sheep populations then found in Estonia. So as an final thoughts about this preservation of the native sheep in Estonia, then I can say that it's very important that you are able to do enough DNA analysis and equally then from all regions in order to preserve the genetic diversity as diverse as possible. So in the Estonian case, then one region got much more investigated than other regions, and that was connected with the UNESCO financer, because the financer was providing finances only for UNESCO areas, and this Kihnu native island was or is under the protection of UNESCO, UNESCO World Heritage Site. So due to this financing, we lost then a lot of the genetic diversity that could have been collected in the beginning of the 2000s. So if we would have had a financer that would have financed more samples, then we could have afforded to also rescue more animals from different geographical places. So if you want to arrange for searching for native animals in some geographical region, a country or a part of a country, then it's important that you try to look for these animals in all different regions in order not to only end up with a bigger part from one region, because you will then be able to preserve a larger genetic founder group, because this analysis will be then the basis for the continuation of the conservation work of the sheep. It's also important that you don't close down your founder populations. So you should leave the back door, so to say, open. So if you find new animals on farms later on, you could then add them to the population, which again will give a broader genetic scope for the population preservation work. Still, so many years later, we have very few scientific research carried out on Estonian native sheep. There are more than this, but anyway, the native sheep is still not yet the focus for research in the Estonian agricultural sector.